Hello, many greetings from me, John Bouman, and thanks for tuning in to our YouTube video on the production possibilities curve. This is part of Unit 1 of our free online textbook, www.inflateyourmind.com. A production possibilities curve shows the relationship between how much we can produce, and usually because we have a two-dimensional graph here, usually we just have two products. In the book we used guns and roses, guns representing the category of military products. Roses represents the category of consumer products. Here we're using two different products, food and computers. So if we're looking at how much of food items we can produce or how many computers we can produce, we can see from the graph that we could produce we can use all of our resources, and by resources we mean the people that produce these products, the land, the raw materials, the oil, the seeds, all kinds of anything we get from the ground, as well as machines and capital and so forth. So resources is the things that we use to make these products. So if we use all of those resources and we make only food and no computers, then we're looking at a point on the curve on the what's called the y-axis, the vertical axis, and we can see that we can produce 10 units of food, and we are then going to produce no computers. So that's one extreme, and 10 units of food, you can think of maybe 10 million units of food if you're looking at a country. We could also use all of our resources and produce computers and no food. Of course, wouldn't be very smart because we have no food, but theoretically that's what we can do. And in that case, our production possibilities curve says that we can produce 14 units, or realistically speaking, let's say 14 million computers for this country. And then, of course, if we use all of our resources to make only computers, then we couldn't make any food, so we'd make 0 units of food. Now, more realistically, a country or an area or a state would make a combination of these two products. For example, let's take a look at this point here. Let's call it point A. And point A says that this is around maybe 9 million units of food. And if you draw a line to the horizontal axis, around 7 million computers. So that is one possibility. Now, another possibility would be if we made more computers and we made less food. So here it looks like number of units of food is 6 or 6 million. And the number of units of computers is around a little bit over 10. So let's call that point B. Now, of course, we can make all kinds of points. We can look at point C, even more computers and less food. Or we can look at another point, this point here, let's say point D. And that would be more food and less computers. So if we're on the curve, in order to make more computers, let's say we move in this direction, then we'd have to give up production of food, and vice versa. If we were moving the other way, we'd make more food and fewer computers. By definition, to be on the curve means that we are using our resources as efficiently as we possibly can. So there would be very little or no unemployment. All of our land, or at least our productive land, buildings, machines, we are using to the fullest extent. And that is what it means to be on the curve, on the blue curve. If a country produces inside the curve, let's say at a point here, let's call it point U, that, of course, it's possible to make less of both products, let's say 4 million of food and about 5 million computers. So then we would be at this point, and of course we would be producing well below our maximum or below our capacity. So in this case we would have lots of unemployment, we'd have inefficiency. For some reason we're not producing as much as we can be producing. if we moved from point U to a point closer to the curve, we could actually make more of both products, as opposed to when we're on the curve, let's say from point A to point B. If we're on the curve and we want to make more of both, we have to give up production of another product. But if we're at point U, then we can make more of both without having to give up production of one or the other. Now, what does it mean to be at a point outside of the curve? Let's take a look at that point here. Let's choose a different color. And let's look at this point here. Maybe we'll call it point F. Now, is it possible to be at point F at this point in time? And the answer is no. At this point in time, with the current resources, the maximum is anywhere on the curve. So by definition, we could not reach point F. But in the future, we perhaps could have a curve that goes through point F or close to it. And perhaps this could be our production possibilities curve. Let's call it PCF sometime in the future. And now how do we, let's say 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So the curve would actually shift outwards. So point F is a future point. How do we reach point F, or how do we shift the curve out? There's two reasons for that. One is if our technology advances. So if we have better technology, we use our resources more efficiently, then we could shift the curve out. Or if by our current production we are producing more machines, we could increase our resources. Or if we have a bigger population, or if we have immigration, we have more people coming into the country that allow us to produce more. So over time, in the future, by increases in technology and or increases in resources, we could shift the whole curve out, and we could be at point F, which also means we could have more of both in the future.